Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale comic book figure unboxing and review. Today we're taking a look at the Amazing Spider-Man. Now it seems Hot Toys can still surprise us. I thought we knew what was coming down the pipeline for say the next 12 to 18 months, but they proved me wrong because they dropped this guy out of the blue, and it wasn't a traditional pre-order window, it was, here he is, go ahead and grab him, he is in stock in our flagship stores in Hong Kong. Unfortunately though, they only released 400 units, so he is pretty limited. Now I got mine at a discount from Pop Collectibles. As always, do your own research, make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site along with the discount code Justin's Collection for 5% off your order in the description below. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon and join button so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys review goes live on the channel. As for the box art, of course they did. If you're making a non-artist specific greatest hits comic book Spidey, you're gonna want to make the front of the box look like a comic book cover. It's too good of an opportunity to pass up. And not just any comic book cover, mind you. The Amazing Fantasy 15 cover, the first comic book appearance for Spidey. I do like the way this looks, I just find it a bit strange that they didn't use the figure to recreate this pose. And the fact that he's missing his web wings, especially considering they do come included. I like the composition, and I love the background. We've got this electric blue web over the top of a bunch of comic book panels. Then for the corner cover box, a metallic Marvel logo, Spidey just hanging out, and the product number, CMS 015. Then down below, a bunch of comic book dots on this bright glossy red panel. Oh, and they do continue onto the side of the box. It wraps around the edge, and you can feel those dots. They are textural, they're raised on the surface. The web pattern just spills over the edge, and we have an amazing Spider-Man logo smack bang in the middle. And then around the back, very fitting, we have Spidey's back spider symbol, with a bunch of comic book panels overlaid inside the spider logo, as well as some boring old warnings and legal information. And then underneath all that, finally, an image of the actual figure himself, just jumping out of this spider web. He's also sporting those very strange mirrored chrome lenses. I'm pretty sure they're more of an homage to the original TV shows and movies rather than the comics. I am by no means a comic book Spidey aficionado. I know all of the main looks though, so I'd like to think that I would know if he was ever sporting chrome eyes in the books. First in-hand impressions for Spidey, I am loving the deep, rich royal blue. So far so good. What we are going to do now though is get all of his accessories laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything he comes with. Starting off with the display base first, which we will have to discuss in stages because that forced perspective diorama backdrop thing doesn't really like to be handled. It's more so just meant to sit on a flat surface, which is fine. Now the bottom portion of the base is done in the hexagonal style. There isn't any nameplate, which I find interesting. That's for a very specific reason that we'll get to in just a second. Up top, a bunch of comic book art, and it's done in two-tone. You've got red fading into this more bluish purple. Whereas in the middle, a couple more comic book panels, an image of Green Goblin in pain, and it's nice and textured, whereas the rest of the artwork is more of a high gloss. We do have a dynamic flight pole and a spring-loaded waist clamp. Just be careful if you're using this because they do tend to dig into Spidey's suit over time. We also have this piece, which is optional, you can remove it if you don't like it there. It's a wire for Green Goblin to sit on. It is covered in this clear plastic, which is pretty unique. I don't think I've ever seen Hot Toys do this before. Then at the very top, this little flat cover piece. You can remove this, and you can use this in a couple of different ways. You can use it how I had it, or you can pop it like this, then you can angle the flight pole up, and now the flat surface is around the front. So, like I said, a couple of different options. Specifically meant for these massive Spider-Man logos, and these are just so much fun. I love how bright and colourful and large they are. They're all printed on this quite thick sturdy acrylic by the way, so I don't think they're going to warp or deform over time. The printing is very sharp and high quality, and you get a couple of different versions. You get the Spider-Man 90s animated series logo, which just so happens to be my favorite of the bunch because animated series Spidey rules. Then you get the Amazing Spider-Man, a little bit more retro and slightly translucent. And lastly, a thwip effect. With all of these different versions of Spidey running through it, I can spot McFarlane's Spidey right there. Now, the way you attach these is quite straightforward, actually, just with some pieces of 3M tape, which do come included. You get 6 in total. I would have preferred if they were magnetic, so you could have them on the top or down below just by popping them on there. But 3M tape, I guess, does do the job. It's just not quite as reusable as I would have liked. Single-use pieces of double-sided tape, I don't think was the best option. So if you do decide to use one of the logos as a nameplate, you'd have to put the double-sided tape down below and you'd probably see it, although it might blend in with the black of the display base. They are quite tall too, so you will be obscuring a lot of Spidey, and that's why I think I'm going to go with it hovering above the display base, rather than in front of it like a nameplate. We're almost done with the display base, I promise. It's just this last diorama force perspective thing we have to discuss. The bottom portion is hexagonal, and it's relatively grippy, so the display base shouldn't shift around on the surface if you pop Spidey on there. It should be nice and planted. Now, the buildings you have to assemble yourself, and it's quite straightforward. There's just some origami to do. You have to fold up the little bits and pieces and slot everything together. The instructions do a pretty good job of telling you where everything is supposed to go. It's all lettered and numbered. Now, I particularly like the red background on the buildings. It does help them pop and stand out. And the little Easter eggs. There's a wanted logo for Green Goblin and the Daily Bugle back here. Having the buildings be these funky shapes does work for a force perspective effect. It looks like Spidey's swinging through the buildings. Will I be using this in the display? Oh yeah, absolutely. You do get this little mini Green Goblin that's well enough detailed, but it's not perfect. There's a little hole down below that's supposed to plug into that flight pole we discussed, and the paint is clean, but not super exciting. I mean, the gradient's cool for this thrust effect and the pumpkin bombs, but his face just looks really goofy. And I know Green Goblin can be goofy, but he's more so menacing in my opinion. I would have liked to have seen some more detail on the face, especially the eyes, and even some scales on his arms and legs. It's just quite plain, simple, and flat. Which I know is comic booky, so it can work. Because it's so small in the distance, it'll probably be perfectly fine. I'm just nitpicking. We do get some web wings, which are done in this almost purple translucent plastic, with the lines printed over the top, and some magnets to hold these onto Spidey. Just be careful with the edges not to spike the suit, because they are pretty prickly. These might just be my favourite accessories here. We have some swap-out web shooters. They're done in this metallic silver, and they're made of this softer rubbery plastic. There are some ports around the front that are specifically designed to work with the webs, which we will discuss later. Then again, the camera might be my favourite accessory here. This thing is full of detail. We've got PP in the corner for Peter Parker, the logo around the front. It's done in this nice metallic silver, matte black for the textured sections. But the lens has this blue colour shift to it, and it's glossy. And then the flash up top has depth, plus this grill over the top, making it look very realistic. And there's this pleather strap, so you can have Spidey wearing this. So now that I'm seeing it up close, yeah, I think I've got to go with the camera. Even this little viewport has been painted in high gloss. Hey, I guess that can happen. I change my mind throughout the course of the video as I'm starting to look at things up close, then I can, decide which things I like more than others. You do get a bunch of different webs, and these are actually the original Hot Toys webs, not the new ones that they included with the Advanced Suit 2.0 and the upgraded suit Miles from Spider-Man 2 on PS5. I would have liked to have seen those, but these are okay. You get the spooled up web, you get the slightly shorter ones that plug into the web shooters or his hands, some longer ones, and one made for web swinging poses. Plus the funnel web attachment that you can plug on the end. But the webs are quite floppy, and the funnel web is heavy, so it will droop down over time. Even though these are reused webs, this time they're painted in bright white, so all of the sculpted detail does pop. To try and give a bit of a nod to all of the different artists of Spidey over the years, we have a bunch of different lenses. We've got the chrome ones, still not sure about them, the non-chrome versions, we then have the slightly squinted, and then the all the way squinted. Something that you can't really tell on camera, more so in person, is that there is a ton of stuff to look at on these lenses. We've got the high gloss surface over the top, then underneath that this honeycomb pattern. And they've hit the edges in this blue, which is completely unnecessary, but it's a nice little touch that adds some more visual interest. And lastly, a full array of really stylized Spidey hands. They all have the raised web lines and they all have the texture on the surface, but the sculpts are unique from left to right, even with the hands doing the same gesture like these wall crawling hands. The fingers curving the way they do and the hands being all kinds of geometric just is such a vibe, and it screams comic book Spidey. Goes to show that they put in the effort here. They didn't just flip them in ZBrush, and it has not gone unnoticed. My favorite hand, though, has to be this one, and this is something I'd like to see going forward with MCU Spideys, for example. If you couple this one up with the spooled up web, it looks like he has grabbed a fistful of it and he's just web swinging through town. This is such a neat effect, and oh yes, I want to see this way more often. Painting the web as cleanly as they did around all of the detail and the web lines on the hands cannot have been easy. What we are going to do now, though, is get Spidey himself out here. Standing straight up and down in the lightbox, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. He's not perfect. There are a couple of things that we do need to dive deeper into, and we will in just a second. For the most part, it's pretty cohesive. Everything works well together. The shape and size of the spider symbols, the proportions being exaggerated, yet also kind of realistic at the same time, having these big broad shoulders, then he slims down for the waist with that natural V taper. The choice of materials and the color scheme at play here being a little bit darker in tone, and then the massive comic book eyes. All of that stuff I love. Now, with all of that being said, the question is this the definitive Hot Toys Spidey? Well, that's something we're going to have to answer a little bit later. Up close and personal, kicking things off with Spidey's head sculpt. I like the idea of what they've done more than the actual execution. In theory, you're supposed to get the best of both worlds here. The sculpted plastic head with the fabric mask over the top, so that you have the nose, ears, and jawline poking through, but an overall seamless look, so the head sculpt will blend in with the rest of the suit. In reality, doesn't really work that way. There are seams absolutely everywhere. We've got a seam at the base of the neck, for some reason not hidden by a web line, another seam underneath his chin, so the mask is pulled taut underneath it so it sticks out a little, and a seam line running over the top of his head, which is the most egregious one. I have tried to straighten up that web line, it just doesn't work. It's always wonky, and it's right up the front. It is so freaking ugly. At least the shape is good. It's a nice facsimile for a comic book Spidey. It works for multiple different versions, is what I'm trying to say. The lenses do remind me of McFarlane, Bagley, and Ultimate Spidey, so again, a blend. You've got this little kick up in the corner, and this point where the circle meets in the middle. I do think that circle is supposed to be a little bit lower. At least the fabric does match the suit, so from a distance, okay, it blends in well. I just would have preferred if the suit continued up the neck, then the head sculpt was actual, just sculpted plastic. You could have had switch out head sculpts, a Peter Parker head, and it would have been way more seamless than whatever the heck this is. Now, he does have switch out lenses, and it's relatively easy to do that. You push the top corner, and then the lenses come out. Unfortunately, we do now have to try out the chrome ones, so let's give them a go, I guess. Yeah, no. I mean, it's unique, so I'll give it that. It's just not for me. They are proper, bright, shiny metallic chrome, like just a real mirror reflectiveness going on. I will never be displaying my Spidey wearing these eyes. Nor will I be using any of the squinted eyes. When artists like Ditko, for example, draw Spidey with smaller eyes, the black sections are smaller too. It's not just the white in the middle that shrinks. You could argue that this is him actually squinting and emoting, but in the comics, usually his entire eye is moving. It's not just the middle section. If only they'd done the switch out head sculpts, we could have had actual proper comic book artist style head sculpts. A McFarlane one, a Bagley one, a Ditko one. But they didn't. They just went with the switch out lenses, so they are kind of married to having to use the same crevice for all of the different styles of lenses. And it just doesn't work for me, like I said. You can mix and match though, so if you do want to have him winking or emoting or focusing or one eye chrome for whatever reason, totally an option. Somehow though, the Maximum squinted ones do work slightly better than these. I still find it weird that the black sections are as massive as they are. The suit itself is made up of multiple different styles of fabric. The red is more of just a screen printed for the webline stretchy spandex, whereas the blue is that traditional rubbery style fabric like we saw on the classic suit Spidey. I was hoping that the blue would also be fabric. That way you could have gotten maximum range of motion and not worried about creasing and damage. But as it stands, you will have to be a touch more careful for the blue sections. For the red, I would still exercise caution because the web lines might crack or peel off, but I think they're going to be a touch more durable than the blue. My favourite detail around the back, however, is this retro-looking spider symbol. It's super simplified, and that is perfect for a comic book version of Spidey. It's also raised on the textured blue surface. The front spider symbol also quite comic booky. I particularly like how the legs flare out the way they do, and how chonky it is. If the web lines were as thick as the spider symbol, you might not have been able to see it as well as you can from a distance. There's enough of a contrast in the thickness of the lines for it to stand out. Now, the red sections are textured. You can see a little bit of that spandexy texture to it as the light bounces off the surface, but it's more so the nature of the material than any kind of screen printing. Whereas the blue has a lot more texture going on. And there are some nice thick black lines around the blue panel, so it does separate it from the red really well. Now, the proportions are good, but exaggerated. You can see these big round shoulders, a drop down at the traps, making him look slightly blocky, some large biceps, and the pecs and abs poking through. It would have been cool to see some shading over the top, just to accentuate that musculature. Not to say it looks bad, like I said with the head sculpt, it just is a matter of personal preference. Now, the hands do come over the top of the suit for the wrist pegs, so the wrist pegs themselves are completely hidden. But if you decide you want to pop his web shooters on, that's also an option. Made of this slightly soft rubbery material, so sliding them on and adjusting them after the fact is actually really easy. And there's enough play that I don't think they're going to do any damage to the suit underneath either. Those screen printed web lines, I reckon they're safe. My favourite detail about the web shooters is that these little pieces that stick down the front actually wedge right between his fingers there, so it looks like he's about to push the web shooter activators. They've even gone so far as to sculpt unique thwipping hands for either side. On this side, the fingers are curled, whereas on the other, the fingers sit a little bit more flat. Now, if you decide you want to plug a web in, there is a hole around the front, so it does actually look like the web is being shot out of his web shooter. And now you can angle the hand forward as Spidey usually does, getting his fingers out of the way of his webs. But if you decide you don't want visible web shooters, totally fine, you can just slide that off. You can then plug the hand back on and remove the panel on the palm. It's a little bit tricky to do on camera, trust me, in person it's a hell of a lot easier. When you plug this one in, stop me if you've seen this before because Hot Toys have been doing this a lot recently, you can then take the web and plug it into this little spooled up section on his palm. Now it looks like it's being shot out of a hidden web shooter. I like this, I just don't love that if you angle the hand forward, the web goes down along with it. I prefer to have the web go straight, then you can angle the hand down. You can only really achieve that with the web shooters on. It also comes with the web wings. Number one, why are they purple? And number two, I just really don't like the way Hot Toys does web wings, I've decided. They almost contour to the shape of the body, almost. You can still see there's a gap there, and you can't really do anything about it, because you can't bulk out the body on the side to fill that out. It just is there permanently. Sometimes the magnets hold them well, and other times they just fall off on you. Trying to use these in a pose is a challenge. Maybe you will have better luck than I will, but as you can see, yeah, they just really don't want to be there. And that's fine, because I don't want them to be there either. His legs are mostly covered in that rubberized textured blue material. It is a little bit baggy back here, whereas around the front, it's more form-fitting. Enough so that you can see some musculature poking through. It is a sturdy feeling fabric, so it's going to hold its shape over time, yet it is flexible enough that you can do some dynamic poses. Just don't leave him in those dynamic poses, because stuff like this will bake into the surface, and this style of fabric does have a habit of sticking to itself. It's a little bit self-healing, don't push it too far. Coming down to his boots, they're made of the same stretchy spandex as the red stuff on the upper torso. They're also not separate boots, they're part of the overall suit, so they're completely seamless. Speaking of seamless, finally they've fixed the ankles. No longer does the fabric tuck into the joint and look all kinds of nasty, it's very smooth. You can even see his ankle joint sticking out around the side. That does look pretty realistic actually. Then the shape of the feet do remind me of Sam Raimi's Spidey. They're quite angular and they've got this squared off toe. Then on the underside, you do have some soles, and you have some toe articulation, which, interestingly enough, actually ratchets down. I think that's the first time I've ever seen that from an articulated toe joint from Hot Toys. For a quick side-by-side comparison, on the left, comic book Spidey, and on the right, the PS4 game Classic Suit, who used to be my favourite Hot Toys Spider-Man. I still love it, don't get me wrong, it's just that the new version has kind of won me over in certain areas. The proportions, how built he is up top, then how he slims down for his legs, the stretchy spandex for the red sections of the outfit, the shade of blue they've gone with, the shape and size of the spider symbols, all of the accessories, and the massive eyes. It's not perfect. I still think the choice of material for the blue sections is wrong. I reckon they should have gone with spandex. Everything else, though, I have to give to the new comic book one. Next up, So Toys Green Goblin. It almost looks like these two figures were designed to be displayed together. I don't think I've seen a more perfect pairing in 6 scale. It just screams iconic, nostalgic comic book Spidey to me. There is one issue, however, and I'm pretty sure you can tell what it is right off the bat. Green Goblin does run a little bit small, and it's not something I noticed in the original review either, so I suppose it's this new Spidey that's too tall? You can sort of level it out a bit by popping Green Goblin on his glider, but just standing together, you will notice the height difference. And then we have, for now at least, the only other Hot Toys true comic book figure. They're Iron Man. I don't really count those clear plastic figures because they're more of an artist collab than a true comic book line. This guy though, fully painted in the bright red and yellow, he just works so well next to Spidey. There are more comic book figures coming in the future from Hot Toys, aka Hono Studios. I was thinking though, what if you wanted to display your comic book Spidey next to your Sideshow comic book figures? Here we have their Wolverine, and as you can see, the scaling works pretty well. Wolverine is shorter than Spidey, exactly as he should be. Going over articulation, starting off with Spidey's head sculpt. It is on a separately articulated neck, and for some reason a hinge and swivel, rather than a double ball peg. It's also covered in fabric, so do be careful not to catch any of this fabric inside the joint itself. Looking forward to there, looking up to there, just enough range for a web wing pose. You also get swivel and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there on clicky ratchets. Going forward and back, there's a butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep, double bend at the elbow going past 90, and a very nicely concealed hinge and swivel for the wrist peg. The torso is padded slightly, but I don't think that's going to get in our way. There are 2 joints here, and they're on ratchets. Crunching forward to there, going back to there, swivel, and pivot side to side. His legs will go forward to there on clicky ratchets. Just be really careful of all this bunching. The material actually goes into the joint, and the last thing you'd want is to tear or crease anything. They will go out to there, also on ratchets. Swivel at the upper thigh. Double bend at the knee going past 90, and then a double ball peg for the ankle. Good for forward and back swivel as well as ankle tilt. And some ratcheted toe articulation. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing is, I know that someone at Hot Toys has read a Ditko-era Spider-Man comic at some point. Enough to know that when Spidey has the smaller eyes, the black part is smaller too. Now, I know the crevice is specifically designed for these larger lenses. The way around that was just to have switch-out head sculpts, a McFarlane-style one, a Bagley-style one, and a Ditko-era head sculpt, rather than just trying to finagle these smaller eyes into the larger lenses. It just looks really weird. The second annoying thing, even though this is quite small, it's not small enough that I don't think Hot Toys could have done better with the paint applications, especially his face. Those eyes, they just look goofy as hell. The third annoying thing is, even though this base is compatible with the crotch grabber, they decided, nah, no need to include one. We're just going to include a dynamic flight pole. And I know what you're thinking. Well, it's Spidey, Justin. You're always going to have him in a dynamic pose. If you do that, and you have him on the waist clamp, you are going to do damage to the suit. So for collectors like me who want to preserve the suit and just represent Spidey standing in the display in a museum/character pose, I think if the display base is compatible with a crotch grabber, it should just come with one. The first cool thing is how seamless this wrist peg area is. The web lines line up and the hand cups over the top of the wrist peg. Plus the suit is protected with a little bit of a rubbery stopper on the end. So I don't think it's going to fray or the web lines are going to peel off over time. The second cool thing, it's the swap out logos, and the fact that you can use them in any way that you want really. If you want to have them on the background, you can do that. If you want to have them stuck onto the display base, that's also an option. Now, I personally prefer the animated series Spider-Man logo, but this classic The Amazing Spider-Man one, that's cool too. I think I need to find a way to use both of these in the display. The third cool thing is we get so much Spider-Man history with all of these accessories. You get some swap-out external style Spider-Man web shooters. You get this hand in a brand new style with a web wrapped around it. We've never seen anything like this before, and by all means, Hot Toys, please keep doing this even with your MCU Spidey figures. A camera so he can snap some Daily Bugle pics, and the web wings. I do wish the web wings looked a little bit more webby though. Still, I'm glad all of this stuff is included. Wrapping up on the Hot Toys comic book Spider-Man, my new definitive Hot Toys Spider-Man. Yes, the classic suit can stand in for comic book Spidey any day of the week, and he's amazing, pun intended. This guy, he takes everything I love about the classic suit and goes to the next level. They went further with the spider symbols, even more retro. They've thrown in some stretchy spandex. They've gone with the classic looking web lines. They've darkened the color palette. They've given him the big bug eyes that I'm a massive fan of. And you get the switch out lenses, and you get the swap out web shooters, and you get the web wings, and a bunch of unique gestures for the hands. And even a camera, plus a mini Green Goblin, plus a forced perspective display base. So you can see what I'm trying to say, he comes with so much stuff, and the figure himself is just really solid. The body being as big as it is for the upper torso, then how it slims down for the legs, that just reminds me of the 90s animated Spidey. Would I have preferred if they'd gone with maybe one interpretation, like that animated look, or even McFarlane? Yeah, probably. Am I mad that they just cherry-picked the best parts from all of the different incarnations of Spidey? Absolutely not. I think it's worked, and I think it was the right call, actually. In the future, they can make specific artist versions. Right now, being the first comic book Spidey they've made, I think this was the way to go, and I reckon they nailed it. Even though there are a couple of drawbacks, like the rubbery fabric for the blue, and the chrome eyes, plus the squinted eyes not really working so well, I don't really care about any of that, nor the seams on the head sculpt. From a distance in a pose, you're not really going to notice it. So at the end of this, do I recommend him? If you're a Spidey fan, specifically a comic book Spider-Man fan, I think this is a must-get. And it was available right after they announced it. You don't have to wait a bunch of years to get this guy. Now, I got mine from Pop Collectibles at a discount. As always, do your own research, make sure you are comfortable before buying. I have popped the link to their site along with the discount code Justin's Collection in the description below for 5% off your order if you do decide to buy from them. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video.